Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Terrace Scottish Football Podcast. I am your host, Craig Fowler, and on this occasion, I am joined by Mr. Joel Sked.
Hello. That was a very positive and enthusiastic introduction.
Anybody that allows me to record these podcasts during the day and not an evening hour, so I'm up editing till about 9 or 10 or 11 or even beyond midnight sometimes, is going to get an enthusiastic introduction from me, Joel. So thank you very much for joining me. We wanted to do it a bit earlier, but things got in the way, but it's fine. We're doing it in late afternoon. This should be up by early evening on the Tuesday. Again, apologies again, there's no show on a Monday, but it is Scottish Cup weekend, and that's our new tradition, is to wait until all the fixtures are done, because the BBC has a new kind of inkling for putting matches on Monday nights now, which is good for those who have got nothing better to do, but bad for us when we usually like to record a podcast on a Monday.
Yeah, I mean, I like the fact that the 4 games are split over the 4 days, so I was able to watch last night's.
Yeah, I said inkling there, that's not a thing. Predilection, there's the word I was looking for. But anyway, we've got 4 games to get to, as Joel said, the Scottish Cup action for this past weekend, and we will do it all in... Let's go for reverse chronicle order, shall we? Since it is a Tuesday evening already, and possibly even later if you're listening to this, so you may have already heard or you want to know about Hearts' scintillating 3-1 victory over Dundee, which sees them play Aberdeen in the Scottish Cup semi-final. But let's start with one of the victors who will be facing off against Celtic in the other semi-final, and that is St Johnstone, who defeated Livingston by 1-0. And Joel, I'm just going to go to you straight off the bat. You have said a couple of times recently on this podcast that you are a big fan of Graham Carey and his work. So, Joel, the floor is yours. Wax lyrical about that incredible winning goal.
Oh man, I absolutely adore him. Everything about him. I've always appreciated or admired just how good his left foot is. And the more I've watched him over the last couple of years, he's just a fun player to watch, because is he going to track back? No. Is he going to do much defensive on the defensive side? He would chip in, but I mean, he's at an age now, he's probably thinking, I cannot be fucked tracking back. So I'm just going to get the ball, and then I'm just going to try worldies or World Cup passes, and he's brilliant at it.
Speaking of him defensively, do you actually remember when he used to be a left back? In fact, do you remember that Dundee United had him on trial in the 2013 summer window and eventually said, "Nah, you're all right, we don't need you," because that was after they realised how good the young left back from Queen's Park they'd signed was going to be.
And then he played, it was, if my memory serves correct, it was Ross County. He went to Ross County and he's just scored. I just remember him scoring. I think it's because he should have went to Ross County and then Graham Carey and then down to Plymouth.
He did go to Ross County, you're right. I'd actually blanked out Ross County from my mind. I remembered St Mirren, but you're right, then he went to Plymouth afterwards, and that was when he started scoring loads and loads of goals. I think Plymouth played him as a number 10,
yes,
if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, just build your team around him, and he's able to do incredible stuff. And even back then, he was scoring absolute screamers. And now I was watching the iPlayer on my iPad, and in one of my group chats, someone just put in capitals "wowzers," and as soon as I seen that, the only thing I think of, Graham Carey's just done something very, very special. And then when it caught up and he just slammed it in from what? I'm going to say 45 yards. It was probably closer to 30.
Print the legend, Joe. Print the legend.
Yeah, there we go. And it was just, even though I knew it was coming, it was still great to see. I would have liked to have seen Livingston succeed and go through into the semi-final, just because there's a few players in that team that I'm fond of. But yeah, it was a deserving quarter-final winning goal. Yeah, I honestly could watch Graham Carey all day. Favourite player outside of Hearts in the Premiership, and Scotland actually.
So about Carey's kind of role in the St Johnstone team in general, do you think he should be playing a lot more often than he is? Because I'm just looking at his transfer market stats, and he's only completed in the last, let's go all competitions. So that's 1, 2, 3, and then 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, since 12, 13 games since the start of this year, he's only completed 90 minutes 3 times. And one of those he didn't even get off the bench against Hibs. And one of the few 90 minutes games he did complete, he created a goal against Hearts at McDermott Park.
I mean, what is he now? He's 35, so yeah. And just with the fact that you've got in the league games, you've got 5 subs, I'm not surprised that he's not completed a lot of games. And you look at the way that probably Carey wants his team to play out of possession. I can understand it, but there's a part of me when you're looking at playing in the like it's a 3-4-3 that he plays. Just make it 3-5-2. I would just give him a free roll.
Yeah, have your two. That's another thing I don't like about the St Johnstone team, and what I didn't like about their performance. I think they're a lot better when they have, and I think this about every single forward they've got. Pretty much, they're all better with a strike partner alongside them. There's nobody really there in that squad that seems to be like somebody who's adept at playing as a lone striker role. Like Sidibe, his touch just is a bit too erratic. He's a bit on the small side. He's got kind of strong because he's kind of stout and he's got like a good kind of low centre of gravity. Not that he shows it very often because he is sometimes prone to the theatrics, but you've got him who's a bit limited in that sense. Matt Kirk will run all day long, run everywhere he wants, but again, touch isn't really good enough to play up front by himself. Nicky Clark, I think at this stage, at any stage of Nicky Clark's career, I never really kind of saw him as a lone striker type. He's probably a bit better at it now because he's got a bit more kind of wily veteran kind of personality within him. But even still, he's a bit too on the small side. They should be played with 2 up top for me, but instead what they tend to do is what you're saying. It's more of a 3-4-3, even when they do have 2 forwards on the pitch, like they did last night with Mackenzie Kirk playing in that deeper role. And it just limits, whether it's him or Sidibe or somebody else, it just limits their input into the team. And while we're talking about giving Carey the keys, and I get what you mean about the fact that at this late stage of the campaign, with 35 years old, he's maybe not got the legs to do what Carey wants him to do in terms of running. But St Johnstone are right in the midst of a relegation battle and they need some quality in the team, and that team does lack quality in other areas. So have your Jason Holt, have your Sven Sprangler, tell them to just defend and work their lives, work their backsides off, and then you allow Carey to do the business further forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's trying to, you look at that St Johnstone side, I think they've got decent players, and they're definitely a better squad than they were at the start of last season, but you're wanting to maximise as much out of the players that he has available to him at the moment, and I don't think he is. And it goes back to what you said about the front three. Svedberg, I'm unsure what he does.
Yeah, he's invisible so far.
He seems to exist in his own plane where he doesn't tend to do much. But you've got, like you mentioned, Sprangler and Holt, guys who can run all day. They can dig in, put their foot on it, and then you just kind of, they are what they give you out of possession should give you a foundation or a platform for Duke McKenna to be a bit more advanced on the left, and then someone, Graham Carey, for example, in behind 2 strikers.
That's another couple of guys, like Duke McKenna and Sam Curtis, another couple of players who have got all the kind of willingness you would want. But I think quality is a question mark, especially, I've seen this kind of more recently. Duke McKenna has been impressive in the way that he has been quite fearless and direct and going at opponents in every game he's played for St Johnstone. But I think you've seen in at least the Dundee game and this one, there is just a lack of kind of end product quality there.
Yeah. Where
like first half, he was constantly going at Jamie Brandon, but Jamie Brandon was constantly winning that battle. It's a good thing to have. Like I prefer a wide player who will just keep going and going and going regardless how many times he gives the ball away, because the time that you don't and you get past your man, you're capable of creating something happening. But they do have there is a lot of the St Johnstone team, like a lot of kind of youthful exuberance, and like somebody like Carey, like I say, just with that quality that you can kind of bank on a bit more. Not usually, obviously, pulling something like this out of the bag, but at least capable of creating something out of nothing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you've got the issue that St Johnstone have is they've got guys who, and I'd very much class Carey in this, Sidibe in this, Duke McKenna is this. They can do stuff in moments or in stages and flashes, and they can be match winners. But as an attacking force, they don't have many dependable players. I would class Nicky Clark again. St Johnstone fans are better placed than me to assess their team because they watch them every single week. But for me, Nicky Clark would be one of the first names on my team sheet as an attacking force because I know what I'm going to get from him. And you have someone of the maybe more raw ability of Kirk and Sidibe and then McKenna. So you've got a better balance there. But the St Johnstone said have improved, but in going kind of middle to front, there's just don't have a lack of reliability, and that I think is best personified by Sidibe, who at times is like, well, he is a real handful, and then at other times it's like he would be a nightmare to play with and watch constantly.
Nightmare to play against on occasion, nightmare to play with probably more often.
Yes.
They have. It's funny you mentioned kind of front, middle to front, because I think they have improved at the back. Probably couldn't have got too much worse. But even with some of the makeshift defences they've had to play with, players being jettisoned, not maybe bringing in as many bodies as they would maybe like due to budget or player availability or whatever, and then also Bozo Mikulic getting injured as well. They've really had to kind of put together some patchwork defences, but they clearly are better at the back, and I think a big reason for that, and he kind of illustrated it in this game, is goalkeeper Andy Fisher. And it just kind of underlines how mental it was a decision there's been a number of mental squad building decisions by Craig Levein last summer.
Yeah.
But to go with two fairly young, inexperienced goalkeepers at this level, when you're a team that's in all likelihood going to be battling relegation, it's just a recipe for disaster. We covered it on the podcast last season. I actually said it in a podcast with Sean Hamilton when talking about St Johnstone early in the campaign, when I was like trying to look for reasons why Saints had hope, as they looked hopelessly bereft and adrift at the bottom of the table under Steve McLean just before Craig Levein came in. And I pointed out that they had a really good goalkeeper, and teams with good goalkeepers don't go down. So Levein to put his faith in Josh Ray, who'd never been at the level before above Ross Sinclair. Fisher has been a massive, massive upgrade on day two, and it's not so much that it's not so much that it's apparent that he's so much better in terms of kind of outstanding saves. It's just when you watch their games, there's just a calmness, a poise, an experience there with him in goals that he just didn't have before.
Yeah, absolutely. And he was key player in the first half last night, and everything. Actually, there's nothing I can disagree with you in with your analysis of him as a player. And you just want a goalkeeper who you can trust. You can turn back. You can turn around and just go right. He's not only is he going to he's capable of making a big save, whether it's a kind of match defining, match winning, or match saving save, but equally, he can turn around and look at him as like, right, he's not going to chuck one in. And that's vital down the bottom of the table. And go back to the summer decision. I mean, it's when you consider that Craig Levein was trying to get Craig Gordon to come into St Johnstone, and then after that didn't happen, to then go, you know what, yeah, Sinclair and Ray, that's fine. There's I know Gordon's not been the best this season, but St Johnstone I don't think would be either. Yeah, I don't think they would be bottom of the league if they had Craig Gordon in between the sticks.
No, I wouldn't say so. Gordon, I've said this a few times this season, Gordon's been a weird one this campaign, and I think he's made saves that I don't think many goalkeepers in the league would do, including at McDermott Park. But he has also been probably responsible for more goals. I think maybe at least partially responsible for more goals than potentially any other goalkeeper in the league. Because other ones who have been responsible for loads of goals think that duffer at Hibs, whose name has slipped my mind. Bursic. He's not been as responsible for as many saves. Gordon just keeps giving it seems like always been 1-1 to me as this campaign's gone along. Gordon's been slow at getting down for something, been terrible at coming for a cross. We've gone, probably be out the team now. Need to get him out of the team. And then the next game he'll turn around and make an absolutely incredible save. You're like, he's still got it.
This is Scotland's number one you're talking about.
God. Incredible. Incredible, the state of Scotland's goalkeeping. That somebody that's a Hearts legend, who most Hearts fans I think would rather not be in the team anymore, is still the number one for Scotland. But anyway, before we move on, Livingston. David Martindale, he does it again. His cup games against St Johnstone was some weird tactical decisions. So initially he got it right. I thought the setup worked very well to begin with. It was, there was different chat. I think Carey called it a 4-3-3 afterwards, but Andy Halliday pointed out that he felt it was a 4-4-2. It was kind of a mix of the two systems, with Andrew Shinnie kind of at the tip of the attack, with Muirhead shading off to the right. Yengi was more of a left midfielder of the two of them. But it did mean that when they didn't have the ball and they retreated after the initial press, because they helped them in the press, they would have three players at the point of attack, making life uncomfortable for St Johnstone. If St Johnstone managed to pass their way around that, the two would drop in and it would just be a 4-5-1. And then when they did have the ball and they attacked themselves, the best example of this is the chance that Robbie Muirhead had in the first half when it was flicked off them by Yengi. Them two basically going beyond Shinnie, who in that instance acts like a false nine and creates a bit of confusion. So that was all working very well. Second half, St Johnstone got wise to it. They started to, dominate was probably a strong word, but they started to at least have a lot more of the territory, started to push Livingston back a bit more. They went in the game, and Martindale decided to take off Robbie Muirhead. Now, again, kind of similar to what you were saying with Graham Carey. From David Martindale's perspective, you're playing a team in the level above. They're starting to exert some control in the game. You're needing everybody to run as hard and to be as defensively disciplined as much as possible. He maybe saw something in Muirhead in that instance that he didn't like and thought, right, need to get him off and get somebody else on. But straight away, when it was like, okay, Scott Pittman's going up front instead, I was like, I don't think this is going to work. No, sure enough. He can't account for Graham Carey's goal, but after that did go in, they were really toothless and had nothing, because they're taking off their main goal threat.
You look at it and it was more Muirhead coming on, and I seen the person run on the pitch like, hold on, isn't Daniel Finlayson the defender? Yes, he is. So like you look at his defensive, you look at his options on the bench, and there wasn't really ideally a straight swap, and didn't have loads of attacking options. But
I think they missed Stevie May, because he was obviously he wasn't allowed to play against his parent club. But
you look, if he was looking to get just more control and maybe tweak it slightly, you bring on Reece McClear for Robbie Muirhead, and then you could go 4-3-3 and have Yengi up front with Pittman and Shinnie to either side of them, and then McClear, Kelly and Tate gives you guys who can dig in but also control midfield. So that was definitely a curious one.
Right, let's move on to our next game, which took place on Sunday, and that finished Celtic 2, Hibs 0. Joel, for me in this one, it just kind of, weirdly enough, because you don't usually say this about a game at Celtic Park, especially in a game where Celtic were, say, comfortably the better team, but it still felt like a bit of a missed opportunity from Hibs, because Celtic weren't at their best, and Hibs did actually defend really well for the most part. I think they made it. You watch games at Celtic Park, and even games where Celtic only win 2-0, and it looks very comfortable for Celtic. They look like they've got their slippers on. It's in, they're in first or second gear the entire game. This one, it did actually feel like you could feel Celtic straining, Celtic having to work for the opportunities they got. But Hibs, and it's difficult going to Celtic Park, but if you look back at that game, which took place in early December, when they went to Celtic Park, lost 3-0, but created a lot of chances, they just weren't as good going forward in this one.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that was one where you go to, everyone can relate to it as a fan, when you go to a game where you are, and sorry for bringing it to Hearts, but I look at it similarly, like when we went to Copenhagen, and you're like, right, You stayed in the game. You were competitive, but fuck me, it was boring, and you didn't do anything. Like you're wanting, just as a fan, you're wanting to at least lay a glove on the opposition. And you said that Hibs defended really well. They kept their shape really well, and as always, going to Celtic Park, you need your goalkeeper to turn up, and it was Jordan Smith's best game in a Hibs kit. He was excellent, but you always need that. Defensively, I thought they were really sound. Bashiri had a few really good moments with Maeda, but again, I don't know how much Cadden's injury had a impact on this, and I would imagine it was a big impact just because he's been excellent, but to go there and just not put Celtic under as much pressure, especially as a formed team coming into that game on a real high, backed by 7,000 fans. It was just if it was Hearts in that position and waiting there's a fan, I'd feel frustrated.
Yeah,
shortchanged even.
I certainly think Cadden's injury certainly affected matters. It's hard to say how much effect it would have done because it's still Celtic at Celtic Park. But when you look at the rest of the Hibs team as it was set out when he goes off, it's then Jordan Abita. I mean, Jordan Abita's fine going forward, but he's nowhere near the threat that Nicky Cadden is.
Mm-hmm.
That means you're relying more on the player on the other side, Chris Cadden. I think it was Mickey Stewart who was on commentary, I believe. Yeah, I think it was. Saying that everybody talks about Nicky Cadden's crossing ability, but Chris on the other side, just as good. Like, no,
I don't know he is, Michael.
Hang on a minute here. I've had I can see why. I can see why people think that Chris Cadden is as good as Nicky Cadden at crossing, because Chris Cadden, just about every game, whips in what looks like a very dangerous ball. But you watch him often enough, and it's like, this is the ball that he whips in every game, and it's always 5 yards. It's always like whipped in at the corner of uncertainty, and it always like misses every single play, and you're like, if only somebody was there. And then you get to watching Chris Cadden for a long enough stretch where you're like, there's never anybody there though. And if there's never anybody there, surely that eventually becomes the fault of the crosser.
He has taken it on himself in football to be the world's first that with his crossing makes the corridor for uncertainty become the corridor of certainty. With his ability to not make anything uncertain.
So you look at that. So you look at what the options were for Hibs there. So yeah, then there becomes more impetus on Chris Cadden to do things further forward. He's not as good as Nicky in terms of creativity. And then you also look at the midfield. So it's Josh Campbell playing in a bit of a deeper role, as he did do in the league game at Easter Road, which you kind of have to do against Celtic, because otherwise you're basically playing a 3-4-3, and that's basically play against that Celtic midfield to really get overrun. So he's further back. Mariah Welsh is there as well. Those are two players who are fairly limited on the ball. And then you're looking at Nectar Triantis to try and do something with his kind of poison passing ability, and he had a stinker. So then you're just kind of looking amongst the team and thinking, who's helping out really here? Who's helping to build attacks? And really in this game, nobody was. And you could see in very brief moments that Martin Boyle had a bit of threat about him. Kieran Bowie had the best chance of the game. Best chance for Hibs. Had a bit of threat about him as well. But they were really just feeding off scraps, them two.
Yeah, again, they changed it in the second half, pushing for it. And the moment where they broke through Johan, and I think it was Hoylett had the choice of going, I think, to his left out to Johan, who's made a curved run, or Dwight Gale, and the execution just wasn't there. The fact that made, because it was just go back to the game, made the highlights, said a lot about Hibs' attacking threat. And you go back to how they played, and they did so much of what you need to do at Celtic Park. They did that, and then you're kind of just waiting for them. Right, now's the time to maybe play higher up the pitch. I think both Scott Brown and Lennon, I think it was Lennon that mentioned at half times, like, it's probably time. They've done well to be a defensive unit, but time to maybe engage Celtic higher up the park and have less distance to travel when they win the ball. But they just never really did that, and that's probably the most frustrating thing, I would imagine.
Before we move on to Celtic, Jordan Smith's new contract. What's your thoughts?
I think he's fine as our number two.
has he been given a new contract as a number 2 though? Having played now the last 5 months.
But very much hope it's a new contract to be number 1. But I think I still look at him and think he doesn't fill me with a lot of confidence, and he's unorthodox, I think, is the best way to describe him as his goalkeeping style, his goalkeeping technique, but he's not lit Hibs. You're kind of still waiting for him to have a disastrous game, and he's not really had that. And he was excellent. So, but I think if they've signed him for a number 2, I think that's fine. But I'll be interested to see what they do in the summer, because it's a position. Obviously, they'll need to. If he's number 1, they're going to have to sign a number 2, or they're going to have to sign someone to compete for that position for him.
I think Tony summed it up best when he said that because he's in really good form right now, I'm going to pretend to be happy about this.
Yeah. It's the same as it's one of those where if Hearts had signed a pre-contract with Jamie McGrath, you're like, oh yeah, I would be explaining why it was the right decision. But even though I think it would have been the wrong decision.
I thought you were going to say if Hearts had re-signed Lauren Shankland to a new bumper contract towards the end of last season on some of the rumoured figures kicking about at the time. I would have pretended to be happy about it, but I would have been very scared, and those fears would have been realised.
I would still be happy for him to sign a new deal, but yeah, not to the extent that we offered him.
Anything to say on Celtic? I've got something that I want kind of an almost a mea culpa from Terrace Wide, but is there anything in particular that stood out to you? Well, I go first, and then you can see if anything
have things
comes to mind.
Yeah, you go first.
So I think we're maybe, in hindsight, as a collective, because there's definitely a few of us that have said this, a little harsh on the signing of Jeffrey Schlupp, because it now seems like he's ahead of Greg Taylor in the pecking order, and he is playing well. And I also, personally, I must profess some ignorance, because I'd actually forgotten that Greg Taylor's out of contract at the end of the season and hasn't signed a new one. So Taylor may be moving on, with that Celtic wanting to move on, Taylor wanting to try something else, just an impasse that they can't reach, whatever. That could be happening. So it makes sense to maybe bring in somebody else if you're going to move away for Taylor soon. And I didn't realise that Schlupp was out of contract as well. So if you're wanting to bring in somebody that you can maybe have on a rental where you don't need to pay a transfer fee at the end of it, he maybe gets settled in Glasgow, he likes the club, he maybe signs for less money than you would have done if you got in a bidding war with potentially other clubs in the summer. So I think it is actually now a signing that makes sense. And yeah, while it would be better for Scottish football if Celtic, so far clear ahead in the title race, playing Bayern Munich in Europe, so we're unlikely to get through that, would have just said, do you know what, we'll pluck a 17 or 18-year-old from the academy and give him a chance instead. At the end of the day, a football club is going to use its resources to be the best team they could be. And if they don't use those resources, then they're going to get stick off the fans and us, and quite rightly so. So he's starting to look like a pretty good player, and I think the fact that he does a lot of kind of movement inside and looks to shoot, I think that kind of provides a good balance with Alistair Johnson on the other side, who's usually about kind of hitting the byline and putting a cross in.
Yeah, Schlupp is... I questioned him a few weeks ago, not on this, but on the chat. I was like, is he better left back than Greg Taylor? But then at the same time, more watching was like, yeah, I think he's a really good left back for Scotland, certainly domestically, because he doesn't have to do too much defensively. He can just be an attacking force, and like I said, he's not just one dimensional in that he goes on the outside. But yeah, I think it would be nice. I would imagine Celtic fans would want it as well, where they're so far ahead that they would like to see some of the younger players getting opportunities. But we'll see over the next few weeks. In terms of stuff that I picked up, probably one positive, one negative was Jota. Wasn't overly impressed with Jota.
No, because I was getting very frustrated with him, because I was like, right, this is a Celtic game I really want you to win. So come on, get your finger it.
But on the flip side, Callum Gregor, I thought he was excellent. Just the way he supported the attack and they running on to obviously there was obviously the chance earlier on we had it saved, but just how he was knitting things together further up the pitch as well. It did help that the fact that Celtic were Hibs were very deep.
And one more thing before we move on to the next game. There was sunshine on belief at Paradise. Marks out of 10 for that.
Rotten. Absolutely rotten. But it's I'm not it's Celtic are just how do you word this? Celtic trying to be funny is something that they can't do. They just it's that pal who really forces himself to try and be funny, but simply isn't.
It's also simply as well. Isn't. It's just one of those things where, like, everybody knows. See if social media existed at a time like in the 90s, like when the gap wasn't that big, and you're having Celtic poking fun at Hibs after a bit of kind of revenge following the league. So this was, for those who are unaware, this was a tweet that Celtic sent that was, like poking fun back at Hibs after Hibs done the big sunshine on Leith kind of spectacle after they'd beaten Celtic in the league game, and then obviously they've done it again at Tynecastle. But obviously there was something about that I don't want to say stuck in the craw, or rankled, but just kind of stuck in the minds of Celtic and members of the media team or the kind of fan base in general. And then this was kind of them getting the revenge. But it just, when there is such the financial gap that exists these days, it just looks small time, and it just is. But the thing is, if you're Celtic, I suppose it's a bit annoying because there is that financial gap, and it means that you are going to look small time if you try to have fun with literally anybody else other than Rangers. But you have to live it. Christ, pick up your £50 notes and dab your tears with them.
Yes, yeah, and the Malprop sisters and Hibs' use of them on social media, that was better than what Celtic posted. Just stick to winning your games and winning your trophies, and don't try and be cool or funny.
You say that Celtic were bursting with excrement.
Oh, jeez.
Still not really properly gotten over that. Anyway, right, let's get to the game which took place on Saturday, and that was Aberdeen dispatching Queen's Park with a score of 4-1. I think from this one, so I didn't see it at the time, but I watched the first half back because it's quite easy to, especially when the game's on BBC iPlayer, because Wisecout is apparently allergic to the Scottish Cup, so we can't really watch these back most of the time. But this game was on the iPlayer to watch afterwards, so I watched the first half, and it's always good when, whether it's Wisecout, the iPlayer, or whatever, when a game's over by half time, because then you only need to dedicate 45 minutes to looking and see how the game was won and lost. And for this one, I think it all kind of came down to two factors. Firstly, Aberdeen are at home and they're a better team than Queen's Park. But secondly, Queen's Park, I think, went for it in this one more than they did against Rangers. Like, against Rangers, first half was very much like just saying their defensive shape. Contained. They were also very nervy on the ball a lot of that first half at Ibrox, and didn't actually play that well. It was only in the second half when they really kind of started to relax in the game, got their act together, and then got the goal in their best period of that match. And this one, I mean, first, I know it's very early on, but it is Aberdeen away from home and it is Queen's Park, so you expect Aberdeen to be the better team from the off. But first 5 minutes, Queen's Park were the better side, and there was opportunities to get in behind the Aberdeen defence, and they had a couple of, like Hurst, I think, had an opportunity to try and shoot, and he took an extra touch and then it was blocked. And you also had the shot from Turner, I think it was, from the edge of the area, which could have well been going in. It was the angle behind the goal showed that Mitov had a chance of seeing it, but it was hit with that much power that had it not hit Roster, then it might have Noster, it might have ended up in the back of the net. But that was their plan. They went with a 4-4-2 formation. They had Drozd, who scored that goal against Rangers, up there with Rudden. They had Turner on one side, Hurst on the other, and the plan was clear to try and get in behind Aberdeen's fullbacks, because you have Jensen on one side, good going forward, still bit question marks about him defensively. Shinnie on the other side, he's not played as left back regularly for many years, but fair play to him. It was a Shinnie performance of old, and it was great to see him just bombing up and down that wing the entire time. But then that left him a bit exposed at the other end, and I think you see that in the build-up to the first goal. So the first goal is a set-piece, cross from Palaversa. I love a tremendously flicked finish from Kevin Nisbet, who was a bit unlucky that there was just 3 other incredible goals this past weekend that kind of took the gloss off of that. But the initial move came about from Antti Palaversa, who I thought had a very good game in the middle of the park. Him and Clarkson really, they look like a good partnership in there, but I don't know if that's just due to the type of opponent they were facing.
Yeah.
But he dropped in a terrific ball over the top of, it would have been Turner's head, because they couldn't ask Turnernhurst to track Jensen and Shinnie and then try and beat them down the other end. That would just be impossible. They would just run out of steam like far too early, and they'd be susceptible. But what they were obviously trying to do instead is when they were come back to stay in a shape instead, to stay in a 4 and try and get Aberdeen to play through that. And Aberdeen were just quite good at playing through it. This example, Palaversa, beautiful crossfield ball. Shinnie gets it, wins a corner. They score from the corner.
Yeah. It was. Queen's Park's approach made it entertaining game in the first half up until a point where you're well, that's Aberdeen won. So you've got to appreciate that. Whether they might have been better, kind of trying to do what Hibs done to begin with, and then come out and try and frustrate Aberdeen first, and then don't make it as open a game, and then start to look for tempt Aberdeen forward, and then look for weaknesses in behind. But yeah, you mentioned the one main thing that stood out for me watching this. Well, there was a couple, but Palaversa was so good to watch, and I think having, no matter what team you are, having someone who is willing to get on the ball and make longer passes, switch the play, and is very good at it, makes a massive difference to how you can attack teams, and you can get to teams quicker and in better areas. So having him, and especially if you've got wide men who can stretch the game and make it bigger, which Aberdeen have, and certainly the 2 that started in Morris and Keskinen. I don't think Clarkson and Palaversa's are the ideal combination, like for long term, just because I think that's. I just don't think Clarkson. I'm just not a massive fan of him. I just
no, neither.
The ways.
I think he's better in this kind of deeper role that he played in this game. I'm not sick of him, because I don't want Aberdeen to do particularly well, because I'm a Hearts fan. However, I can't help but empathy can't help but take over and feel infuriated for Aberdeen fans whenever I see him starting at number 10. He should never start at number 10. He's not a number 10 in Scottish football. He's just not.
No, he's absolutely not, and he is better as a kind of supporting the play, whether it is a number 6 or probably a number 8. But I would be fearful of him against better opposition when it does become a bit more battling, a bit tougher, of him just going missing. But Palaversa, I think you're watching him, you can see why Manchester City paid a lot of money for him, and I think there's so much promise and so much more to come from him. And yeah, I really enjoyed watching his performance. And then Kevin Nisbet as well, who I have, despite his Hibs past, I've always thought, going back to his Dunfermline time, always been really impressed with him. And I think you're seeing a striker who is finding confidence, and we've seen it with. You see it all the time. See it with Shankland, where fans cannot. Him and Shankland, I can understand why fans are frustrated that sometimes they just don't look quite on it, and there's always their physical shape that's brought into it. But both of them are 2 very good strikers who are technically very good. And with Nisbet, I just think Aberdeen fans are beginning to see that he's kind of through the tough part where it's almost that Jimmy Tulane has kind of persisted with him, and he's battled through it, and you're beginning to see the best of him, because they needed. I know the Bags come in and scored goals, but they needed someone to step up, especially with Papi Gay. starting really well and then getting injured and then looking like the Papagay of old. And then you've got Peter Ambrose. That he needed someone to step up, and Kevin Nisbet's done that. And when he is on it, he adds a completely different dimension to your attack in terms of being able to score goals, technically very good, and link play.
Well, I did wonder about this because he's starting to play well now recently, and I was kind of thinking back. So I might have got this a bit wrong, so forgive me if I have, because I can't remember how he played, like whether he played with a strike partner when he was at Wraith or when he was at Dunfermline. But latterly at Hibs, he played up front on his own, I think. Now, that was probably his most impressive period of his career so far, when he was sold, wasn't he? Wasn't he like the end of his contract? But it was like his last 6 months, he'd come back for the knee injury, he was kind of bigger and stronger and better than ever, and he was excellent as a lone striker for Hibs. But generally, when he was good for Hibs prior to that, he played alongside Christian Deutsch. And it does make me wonder, is he just kind of better when he's playing with somebody else alongside him, rather than having to kind of furrow that lone striker's role where there's a lot of more selfless work that has to go into it and you don't get the rewards. And while that may seem like you're calling a striker selfish and out for their own, every striker will tell you, like, if they don't score in a game, they're miserable, and because they know goals are what they are judged against. So if they don't score, they're going to start to wonder about their place in the team, and if they start to wonder about the place in the team, that's obviously going to affect them. And that could have been happening to Nisbet, and the fact that he's now playing and scoring goals, but he's largely doing it from this kind of second striker role, I think the two things could easily be linked. And just on that front four in general, I think Jimmy Tillene should just give it a bit of a run.
Yeah, like, I agree.
It's a squad game now, and with 5 subs and everything, yes, there is an argument to be made that Shayden Morris, it makes sense that he's in and out of the team all the time because, I mean, let's face it, he's really like a kind of 30-minute player for most games, where he'll turn it on for that period, but otherwise he might not do an awful lot. But he's also somebody that just gets the ball and just does the same thing all the time, which is take on his man and hit the byline, and that just unnerves and can collapse an opposing defence, and it brings balance. Keskinen's no good on the right, he's good on the left. If you're constantly moving him from left to right all the time, how's that going to be good for him?
Yeah.
And as well, like, just kind of talk about, you mentioned a few of the other kind of striker options, to continuously rotate them, that's not going to get the best out of them either. They want to have a run of games in the team to get on the same wavelength as their teammates and everything else that comes with that. Now, you could use obviously players off the bench, and if they're struggling in games, then I think Papagay is the best player to bring on. He's got that X factor, he's got that aerial ability that otherwise Aberdeen lack a little bit in attack. But I think that Tillene rotated too much earlier in the campaign. I think that held Aberdeen back a little bit, and I think it's now time to try and go with something a bit more settled.
Just to add to two of those things, so going back to Nisbet, I think if you asked, I would imagine 90% of strikers, I think they would all say that they prefer playing with someone, because it means that there's not just an onus on them to do a lot of things and have to engage with centre-backs, but takes a lot of pressure off, and it just means to have someone closer to them and they can interact with. So I definitely think the vast majority of strikers are more comfortable and better when they have a partner. And then from his time at Dunfermline, I think he played up front with Andy Ryan. I think there's times when he played as a front two and as a lone striker, maybe Jonathan Afolabi. I think he might have been there at the same, roughly the same time as well. So yeah, I think he's. I think you're going to get the best from him when he's given a wee bit of a freer role, like Shankland, rather than just going, right, you're the number 9 and you have to do everything. Mm-hmm. And then on Morris, he is the antithesis of the type of winger I hate. The winger who gets the ball and then just goes, you know what, I'm just going to play safe and pass sideways or backwards. Whereas I would just keep telling Morris every single time, get the ball, run at the fullback. See if you lose it, who cares? Next time you get the ball, run at the fullback because you're quick. And then there's going to be times where you are, after a while, if you continue to do it, the fullback is going to get tired, he's going to switch off, and then you're away, and then you're at the byline, and you're looking up and putting in a ball at the 6-yard box or whatever. So yeah, 100% agree with you that Keskinen and Morris either side of Nisbet and the bag. Slightly concerned with that going to Hampden Park with those two very quick players.
Yes, just a little bit. And they will. And the reason why Joe is concerned is because Hearts were drawn against Aberdeen for the semi-final, and that was after Friday's 3-1 victory over Dundee. Joe, I was at the game. I watched it half pitched. You watched it while you were sober at the match, and you've since watched it back again while sober, I presume. So I'm going to let you take the lead on this one. What do you think was... Well, actually, Joe, we'll start with the Sander Cartoons goals, and then you can talk more in general about how the kind of game was won and lost, because two brilliant finishes, and I saw somebody describe the performance as Scatchel-esque, which is a compliment, but there's also some constructive criticism in there. And it's basically saying, you haven't really done that much, but you've scored twice.
I would disagree with I can understand why some that I've heard it a couple of times as well, Scatchel, just because as a guy with a left foot scoring a couple of cracking goals. I think that's probably the only similarity you can play, because you can make to the performance. I think he started quite slowly, but then he did do a good job on a defensive point of view in terms of getting stuck in and being...
There's something Scatchel wasn't very good at.
No, yeah, exactly. So he was contributing to that side, but it is a part of his game that Hearts were very much aware of and attracted to. Like, he was a guy who, if he could break into the box and score goals, but also watching him against... I watched his both games against St Mirren when he played for Brann in the Conference League qualifiers, and I think over the two games he must have had 7 or 8 goal scoring opportunities. Were like not all great goal scoring opportunities, but he was getting into good positions in the box or on the edge of the box where he was cutting onto his left foot, and he was looking to get a shot away while it was bending around the defender or kind of cutting across it and trying to put it in the bottom corner. There was a couple of... Off the top of my head, I can remember there was a couple of kind of big blocks against St Johnstone, or the keeper saved, or he's put one narrowly over the bar like he did with his third effort on Friday night. So that was something that I think we were going to see it sooner rather than later. And I think the first goal is something that we could come to see not quite often, but it could be a regular, a semi-regular occurrence where he is stepping in off the right-hand side and the ball's laid to him and he's curling into his left foot. The one with the second one, I think that was just a bit of improvised magic where he's basically refused to use his right foot, but knowing exactly what to do and where to put it. He said afterwards that the first goal was his better one. I disagree. I thought the second one was... I know Graham Carey will probably get it. I thought his second one was the best goal of the round.
I think Carey's was better, but
I'm biased.
I would say that Cartoon's second was better than his first, and my second favourite goal of the round. It was just that kind of little bit of ingenuity, a little bit of class that I don't think many members of the Hearts team would have tried or even thought to try. It was just really cool, and it also as well. He kind of the build up to it as well, because he kind of like cuts the turn and then he strides onto it, and then just the kind of flick with the outside of his boot, just lovely stuff. So what did you see for the greater Hearts performance?
I thought it was a decent first half performance where so long ago. I thought the first half performance was solid enough. It took a wee bit of time. For example, Vargas, it took him a wee bit of time to adapt to what was asked of him in the kind of the diamond shape. And there was a moment where Steinwender stepped forward and tried to play into his feet, but he'd already spun in behind and was looking for a ball down the channel. And then you could see Benny was shouting to him, like, you need to be there, like dropping off to get involved. And then you spin. He's like, you build the play, then you spin in. So there was just wee bits like that, and the And then there was moments where you could see the diamond working, where Spittle and Khartoum were coming deep and the ball was being moved quickly from left to right or right to left, and you're getting Spittle and Penrice down the left. But Dundee did a really good job defensively. I thought they had a good shape, and they were making it difficult for Hearts, where Hearts had a lot of the ball in front of them, and that's what you want. That's where you want, if you're an opposition team, you want Hearts to have the ball in front of you, because it can frustrate the crowd and the ball can go from side to side. And that's something that Hearts have, an aspect of Hearts' play that needs to get better, is being able to break teams that sitting down. Afterwards, in the second half, I don't think Tony Docherty was overly happy with Benny. Benny was the best player on the pitch. No matter Khartoum's 2 brilliant goals, Benny was the best player on the pitch, and he was doing really well in terms of breaking up the play, but also getting the ball in the defensive third and moving it. I think Tony Docherty wanted to engage him a bit more, so Adewumi started to man mark him in the second half, and Dundee started to push up, and it made it much more of a entertaining game. If there was a spell either side of the Dundee equaliser where the game was just back and forth. It just felt like the game was being played in the last minute, where both teams needed a goal to go through.
I think you could say then, moving on to Dundee, that the most disappointing thing about their performance overall was the fact that after Hearts made it 2-1 through Simon Murray's own goal, they didn't really do anything. Like, it looked like they're, which I suppose is understandable. I mean, they are struggling. They've not won in a good while now. They are second bottom of the table. That's them going down away to a team who have beaten them twice this season, beat them 6-0 the last time the two sides played. And so therefore it's maybe understandable that the heads went down and they didn't really show as much belief in themselves to get back into it. But that was kind of what stood out for me, was how comfortable it was for Hearts after Murray's OG.
Yeah. In reality, the Hearts should have won. The Hearts could have and probably should have won 5-6-1, because after the third goal Hearts created another 4 big chances. Dundee obviously committed more men forward and pushed for it, but never actually looked like doing anything with it. I don't think it helped that a couple of their key players were either kept quiet or just had an off night. Simon Murray is always a player I'm wary of, someone who I've grown to appreciate and just respect as a Scottish Premiership striker. Thought he was kept quiet by Hearts centre-backs who played really well. Nielsen probably had his best game in a Hearts jersey, I think. And then you had Mulligan on the right, who Penrice did really well against him, but he was helped by Benny, who kept coming across and taking the ball off Mulligan. And you looked at the midfield, Robertson, McGee, Garza. I just didn't think there was enough control or penetration in there. It just wasn't good enough. I think it's probably the best way to. That wasn't good enough to go to Tynecastle and be the midfield that he needed to be.
Yeah, it's kind of just been. There's not really much more to say on Dundee's kind of big picture stuff, because it was just more of the same. It was a defence that gave up too many chances. Docherty went back to the back three, which is not a popular decision. The midfield three, and this is a kind of another reason to maybe not. I was going to say maybe not play three at the back, because then you're also typically having to play three in midfield. But maybe they need to play three at the back because they need to go with a 3-4-3, because they don't have really anybody to partner Simon Murray as a proper forward at this point in time, and they don't have 3 centre midfielders to play in the middle of the park either, because Robertson played the full 90. Like, there's not really much else to say about him other than, I don't want to be too harsh, but there isn't at this point in his career much else to say about him other than he's willing to do a lot of running and put himself about. But Garza plays a bit further back, tries to kind of get a bit of control in the game, tries to be a bit of a spoiler. He's looked decent enough since he came in, but Mo Salah, a huge player for them last season, especially in the running, falling off a cliff. Just not been good enough at all recently. Jordan McGee hasn't been good since coming back from injury. Lyle Cameron, not available for this one, but in general, very up and down. Had a lot of games where he's not been at it whatsoever. There's just so many. Having looked at Dundee at around about the start of the year and thought, right, don't think they're very good, don't think they'll make top 6, but they've got enough there. They've got enough throughout the squad that they should be fine. Now you're looking at that team going, bloody hell, there is a lot of holes there that need filling, and you can't fill them because we're in March, other than hoping that players return to form that has been hugely absent for a number of weeks now.
I think it was the podcast I did with Tom where it was the panic. Was it the panic ratings? And I talked up Dundee's squad, and I was like, I actually really like the Dundee squad. And as the podcast progressed, and actually, I can't remember if it was watched Dundee like a couple of days after, or I was just looking at their squad not long after. And the more I thought about it more, everything, just exactly what you said, there's holes in there, and it's actually not great. I mean, I don't like being too harsh on players, but I just look at Robertson and McGee. I just think that's a Dundee Championship midfield options, or at least if they're nothing. I think if it's in the Premiership, they are squad players who can come in, and like McGee is versatile, so he's useful when he can do a job in different positions. But when you're kind of if you're having to rely on these guys on a weekly basis, I don't think they are going to get Dundee to the point where Dundee want to be.
Yeah, I think to kind of roll back a little bit my criticism of Robertson, there's been games this season where I've been impressed with him, but it's been matches when things have been going well for Dundee, and he's been an option because he's quite a versatile player. They've played him on the left, they've played him in the middle of the park, played him as a wing back, and in those games where things are going well, his industry works quite well, as it can often do for sides when things are going well, because you do need somebody within your team. You need that balance. You need somebody to put in the hard yards. But when they're in this position and are looking for inspiration or looking for somebody to dig them out, you just need more than that. And I suppose it's not his fault that some of the better players in the team are really struggling as well. But he was somebody that I didn't notice. To be fair, I think he just got a lot of criticism for Dundee fans because he was kept on the pitch for the full 90, while some other players who Dundee supporters may prefer to have been kept on by Tony Dock, stayed on instead. But yeah, it's interesting now. Sunday's the derby, Dundee derby. If they lose at Tannadice, is that the end for Tony Docherty? I wonder if Dundee are simply waiting until they go bottom, hoping that they don't go bottom, because they're looking at what's coming up for the Championship and going, well, we're not great, but we'll beat that, so we'll just survive for another season. But I don't know. I thought he might have went by now, but he's clinging on. But Sunday could easily be the final nail in the coffin.
I didn't think. Again, this is me separated from, without reading too much, what Dundee fans think and taking the emotion away from Gary. I don't think he was under that much pressure, but yeah, we've seen it with. I think the derbies are always one where of course, they're worth more, and losing one can make the situation worse, and you could lose it. Like a loss in a derby is like a 4-game losing run for some fans, and that's what Sunday could be. And it's coming into the season. If you were to ask me which Dundee manager would have been under the most pressure going into a derby, I think everyone would have said Jim Goodwin. I know he was, to be fair, was going into the first one of the season, but to be potentially one game away from the sack, I just didn't think that would be Tony Dock who would be in that position.
I think there's still a lot of fans not a lot. I think there's still some fans who are behind him who still kind of see that he's got credit in the bank, and also kind of see as well, it's just been one of those strange seasons where so many teams have gone on like lengthy losing runs, and some of them have kept their managers and managed to dig themselves out of it, and Dundee fans, some of them are maybe just looking at that and thinking, well, this is our turn now. But that turn needs to happen very, very quickly, because there is I think Gary put it last time I spoke to him about it, he put it at like 60-40 in favour of, as far as he can tell, in favour of wanting Tony Dock to go. And that, you're right, that will jump up to 90-10 or even higher if they get pumped on Sunday.
I mean, if they don't win on Sunday, I mean, it means it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That'll be 9 games without a league win. Then they've got Rangers at Dens. They're then home to St Mirren and then away at Hibs. So it's like they could be in a really bad position come the split. Obviously, it depends on what St Johnstone get up to, but it's the fact that despite how poor and like cast adrift St Johnstone seemed at one point, that Dundee are in a position where they're looking over their shoulders rather than looking above. And considering the nature of the Scottish Premiership, I think every team should be looking kind of above, just because it's been so close. But now Dundee they seem to be in that stage where kind of fear and nervousness can take over, and that's not a great position to be in. Whereas it seems like St Johnstone, there's a galvanising effect there, where there's fans are behind Valakari, and they've made moves to be like they're at least on somewhat of an upward trajectory compared to early in the season, where it's the momentum for Dundee is a complete reverse. And when you're conceding 61 goals in 29 games, mental, absolutely mental.
And I think that stat will do us. Joe, thank you very much for joining me.
No problem. Thank you very much for having me.
And thank you to everybody for listening and your continued support of the podcast. We will talk to you again soon. Goodbye.